The golden retriever mix appeared out of nowhere on Highway 287, limping across the asphalt with a determination that seemed to defy his obvious pain. Emma Rodriguez slammed on her brakes, her heart hammering as her beat-up Honda Civic skidded to a stop just feet from the injured animal. Steam rose from her overheated radiator, adding another layer of stress to what was already the worst day of her 26 years. The dog turned to look at her through the windshield, his amber eyes holding an intelligence that made her breath catch. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. One ear was torn, his golden coat matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood, but those eyes, they seemed to see straight through to her soul. Without hesitation, Emma threw open her car door and stepped into the scorching Nevada heat. "Hey there, boy," she whispered, crouching down as the dog approached her with cautious steps. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The animal studied her for a long moment, then did something that would change both their lives forever. He gently took the hem of her faded sundress between his teeth and began to pull, looking back at her with those knowing eyes as if to say, "Follow me." Emma's logical mind screamed at her to get back in the car, to find the nearest gas station and call for help with her radiator. She had exactly $347 to her name, a suitcase full of her possessions in the back seat, and nowhere to go. The last thing she needed was to follow a stray dog into the middle of the Nevada desert, but something in those amber eyes called to her, a recognition she couldn't explain. Her grandmother used to say that animals could sense things about people that humans had forgotten how to see. As the dog continued to tug gently at her dress, Emma found herself taking one step, then another, following him away from the highway and toward a dirt road she hadn't even noticed. The sun beat down mercilessly as they walked, Emma's city shoes sliding on the rocky ground. Her car grew smaller behind them, a metallic dot shimmering in the heat waves that rose from the asphalt. The dog moved with purpose despite his limp, stopping occasionally to make sure she was still following, his tail wagging encouragingly whenever she caught up. 20 minutes into their unlikely journey, Emma began to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. The landscape around them was beautiful in its harsh rolling hills covered in sagebrush, distant mountains painted purple against the endless sky. But it was also utterly remote. If something happened to her out here, if this dog was leading her away from help rather than toward it, she could die before anyone found her. Just as doubt began to overwhelm her, the dirt road crested a small hill and Emma saw it. Nestled in a valley below was a ranch that looked like it had been carved out of a Western movie. A two-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch sat surrounded by weathered-out buildings, corrals filled with horses, and pastures that stretched toward the mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney despite the heat, and she could see a figure moving near the barn. The dog barked once, a sound of pure joy, and began to run toward the ranch despite his injury. Emma followed more slowly, uncertainty replacing her earlier trust. What was she supposed to say to whoever lived here? That a stray dog had led her to their property, that she was essentially homeless and had followed an animal into the desert based on nothing more than instinct. As she approached the house, the figure by the barn straightened and began walking toward them. Emma's first thought was that he looked exactly like what central casting would order for a cowboy, tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and broad shoulders that filled out his work shirt. His jeans were faded from honest wear, and his boots had the scuffed look of daily use rather than fashion. The dog reached him first, dancing around his legs with obvious affection despite his limp. The cowboy and Emma couldn't think of him as anything else, knelt down to examine the animal's injuries, his hands gentle as he checked the torn ear and tested the dog's leg. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, his voice carrying easily across the remaining distance between them. "Rusty, where the hell have you been, boy? We've been looking for you for 3 days. Emma stopped walking. "The dog belonged here." Of course he did. She felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Nevada sun. She'd followed someone's pet away from her broken-down car, into the middle of nowhere, based on some ridiculous notion that the animal was trying to help her. Now she stood like an idiot in this stranger's driveway, dusty and disheveled, with no reasonable explanation for her presence. The cowboy looked up then, his blue eyes finding hers across the yard. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emma felt that same sense of recognition she'd experienced with the dog, as if some part of her knew this man even though she'd never seen him before in her life. "Miss," he stood slowly, one hand still resting on the dog's head. "You okay? You look like you've been walking in this heat for a while." Emma opened her mouth to explain, then closed it again. How could she possibly make this sound rational? The cowboy, she really needed to stop thinking of him that way, waited patiently, his expression more concerned. "Dear dog," she finally managed, gesturing toward the golden retriever. "Rusty, he was on the highway, he was hurt, and he led me here. He led me here. He led me here." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Rusty led you here. You know how it sounds," Emma said quickly, taking a step backward. "My car broke down, and he just appeared, and he seemed like he wanted me to follow him, so I did, but I realize now how crazy that must seem, and I should probably go back to my car and call someone." She was rambling, she knew, but couldn't seem to stop herself. "Hold on," the cowboy said, raising one hand. His voice was calm, steady in a way that made something tight in Emma's chest begin to loosen. "Rusty's not my dog, exactly. He showed up here about 6 months ago, pretty beat up, just like you found him today. I nursed him back to health, but he's always been free to come and go as he pleases." Emma blinked. "He's not yours." "Well, he is and he isn't." The man's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "See, Rusty's got this habit. Every few months, he disappears for a few days, then comes back with someone who needs help. First time, it was an elderly rancher whose truck had broken down 15 miles from here. Second time, it was a family whose RV had gotten stuck in a wash during a flash flood." Emma stared at him. "You're saying your dog rescues people?" "I'm saying Rusty's never wrong about people," the cowboy replied seriously. "If he brought you here, there's a reason for it." He studied her face for a moment, taking in her dusty clothes and the exhaustion she was trying to hide. "What kind of trouble are you in, miss?" The simple question, asked without judgment or suspicion, nearly undid her. Emma felt tears threaten, and blinked them back fiercely. She'd cried enough over the past week to last a lifetime. "I'm Emma Rodriguez," she said, squaring her shoulders. "And I'm not in trouble, exactly. I'm just between situations at the moment." The cowboy nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Marcus Wilde," he said, extending his hand. "And anyone Rusty brings home is welcome here, at least long enough to get sorted out." Emma hesitated, then took his offered hand. His grip was firm and calloused, the handshake of someone who worked with his hands for a living. "I don't want to impose. If you could just point me toward the nearest town, maybe someone who could look at my car." "Nearest town's 40 miles east," Marcus said, "and Pete's garage closed down last month. You'd have to go all the way to Reno to find a decent mechanic." He glanced toward the road she'd walked down. "Where'd you leave your car?" "On the highway. The radiator overheated." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I've got a truck. We can go take a look at it, maybe tow it back here if needed. I'm pretty handy with engines." "I can't ask you to do that," Emma protested. "You don't even know me." "No," Marcus agreed, "but Rusty does." He looked down at the dog, who had settled himself between them, as if claiming both as his pack. "And like I said, he's never wrong about people." There was something in the way he said it that made Emma wonder about the other people Rusty had brought to this ranch. What kind of help had they needed, and why did this stranger seem so willing to extend it to her? "Look," Marcus continued, when she didn't respond, "it's getting toward evening, and it'll be dark soon. Even if we can get your car running, you shouldn't be driving unfamiliar roads at night. Why don't you come inside, get cleaned up, have some dinner? We can deal with the car in the morning." Emma wanted to refuse. She'd learned the hard way not to trust offers that seemed too good to be true. But something about Marcus Wilde, maybe it was the genuine concern in his blue eyes, or the way he spoke to Rusty like the dog was an old friend, or simply the bone-deep exhaustion that made the prospect of a safe place to rest seem like a gift from heaven, made her nod. "Just for tonight," she said firmly. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be," Marcus assured her. "Come on, let's get you inside. Maria's probably got dinner ready, and she'll want to fuss over you." "Maria, my housekeeper?" "Well, more like family really. She's been taking care of this place since before I was born." Marcus started toward the house, Rusty limping along beside him. "Fair warning, she's going to want to feed you until you can't move, and she'll probably try to adopt you before the night's over." Emma followed them toward the house, marveling at how quickly her circumstances had changed. This morning she'd been driving away from the biggest mistake of her life with no destination in mind. Now she was walking toward a ranch house with a stranger and a rescue dog, feeling safer than she had in months. The porch wrapped around the entire front of the house, its wooden boards worn smooth by decades of weather and use. Rocking chairs sat arranged to catch the evening breeze, and hanging baskets overflowed with flowers that somehow thrived despite the desert heat. It was the kind of home Emma had dreamed about as a child, solid, welcoming, permanent. Marcus held the screen door open for her, and Emma stepped into a living room that reinforced her first impression. The furniture was comfortable, rather than stylish, built for daily use rather than show. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel lined with photographs and what looked like generations of family memories. The hardwood floors bore the patina of age, and everything spoke of a home that had been lived in and loved. "Maria," Marcus called, "we've got company." A woman emerged from what Emma assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was perhaps 60, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and warm brown eyes that immediately fixed on Emma with maternal concern. "Ay Dios mío," Maria said, hurrying forward. "Child, you look exhausted and dusty." "Marcus, what have you done, making this poor girl walk in the heat?" "I didn't make her do anything," Marcus protested mildly. "Rusty brought her home." Maria's expression immediately softened. "Rusty brought her." She looked down at the dog, who wagged his tail as if confirming the story. "Well then, you're exactly where you need to be, Mia." She turned back to Emma. "I'm Maria Santos. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma Rodriguez," Emma replied, something in the older woman's manner making her feel instantly at ease. "Emma," Maria repeated, as if testing the name. "Beautiful. Now you must be hungry, and you definitely need a shower. Marcus, show her to the blue room while I set another place at the table." "Maria, I really don't want to impose," Emma began, but the housekeeper waved her protests away. "Nonsense. Any friend of Rusty's is family here. Besides," she added with a knowing look, "that dog's got better judgment than most people I know." Marcus led Emma up a staircase lined with more family photographs. She caught glimpses of what looked like 3 generations of ranchers, men and women in work clothes, posed with horses and cattle, their faces bearing the weathered look of outdoor lives. At the top of the stairs, he opened a door to reveal a bedroom that made Emma's heart ache with its simple comfort. The walls were painted a soft blue that caught the evening light streaming through white curtained windows. A handmade quilt in shades of blue and cream covered a bed that looked like it had been built to last centuries. A wooden dresser held a ceramic pitcher and bowl, and a rocking chair sat positioned to catch the mountain view through the windows. "Bathrooms through there," Marcus said, indicating a door to the left. "Towels are in the cabinet, and there should be anything else you need. Take your time, dinner won't be ready for another hour." He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Emma, I know this is all pretty strange, and you don't know us from anyone, but you're safe here. I want you to know that." After he left, Emma sat heavily on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd been fleeing Las Vegas with her life in shambles, driving toward an uncertain future with no plan beyond putting distance between herself and the wreckage of her engagement. Now she was in a stranger's home, being offered kindness without strings attached, all because a stray dog had decided she needed help. She thought about David's accusations when she'd finally found the courage to confront him about the money missing from their wedding fund. How he'd turned her discovery of his gambling addiction into somehow being her fault for not trusting him enough. How quickly his charm had transformed into cold anger when she'd refused to lie to her parents about why the wedding was cancelled. "You'll never find anyone who'll put up with your need to control everything," had been his parting shot. "You're 26, Emma. The good ones are taken. You'll end up alone, and you'll deserve it." The words had cut deep because they'd echoed her own fear. She'd spent 2 years planning a future with David, believing his promises that they were building something together. Finding out it had all been built on lies had shattered more than just her heart. It had broken her faith in her own judgment. But sitting in this peaceful room,
Remembering the kindness in Marcus Wilde's eyes and the genuine warmth in Maria's voice, Emma wondered if maybe her judgment wasn't as broken as she'd thought. Something about this place, these people, felt right in a way nothing had for months. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Emma," Maria's voice called, "I brought you some clothes. They might be a little big, but they'll be more comfortable than what you're wearing." Emma opened the door to find Maria holding a neat stack of clothing, jeans, a soft cotton shirt, and what looked like a nightgown. "These were mine when I was younger," Maria explained.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I kept them in case," she trailed off, then smiled. "Well, in case someone needed them." "Thank you," Emma said, accepting the clothes. "You're being so kind. I don't understand why." Maria's expression grew serious. "Child, I've lived on this ranch for 40 years. I've seen Marcus grow from a wild boy into a good man, and I've watched what loneliness can do to someone. That dog showing up 6 months ago was a blessing, not just because of the people he's brought here, but because he gave Marcus a purpose again." "What do you mean?" "This ranch has been in the Wild family for 4 generations, Maria explained. "Marcus inherited it when his parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. He was engaged then to a woman from back east, who took one look at this place and decided ranch life wasn't for her. She left him at the altar, quite literally." Emma winced. "That's terrible." "It was," Maria agreed. "Marcus threw himself into the ranch work, convinced he was meant to be alone. Then Rusty showed up, half dead from neglect, and something changed. Taking care of that dog reminded Marcus that he had room in his heart for more than just cattle and horses." She paused, studying Emma's face. "Every person Rusty's brought here has needed something different. The old rancher needed medical attention. The family needed temporary shelter. A young veteran needed work and a chance to heal. Each time helping them helped Marcus heal a little more too." "And what do you think I need?" Emma asked quietly. Maria smiled. "I think, Mia, you need to remember that there are still good people in the world, and maybe Marcus needs to remember that not all women run when life gets complicated." After Maria left, Emma stood looking at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her dark hair hung limp around her shoulders, and dust streaked her face. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd been running with no destination in mind. The shower felt like a luxury after days of staying in cheap motels. Emma let the hot water wash away more than just dirt and exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to stop moving, stop planning, stop analyzing what had gone wrong, and what she should do next. Maria's clothes fit reasonably well, the jeans only slightly loose, and the shirt soft from years of washing. Emma braided her damp hair and made her way back downstairs, following the sound of voices and the smell of something delicious cooking. She found Marcus and Maria in the kitchen, a room that clearly served as the heart of the house. A large wooden table dominated the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs that suggested decades of family meals. Copper pots hung from hooks above a well-used stove, and windows overlooked the corrals where horses moved lazily in the fading light. "There she is," Maria said with satisfaction. "Much better. Sit, everything's almost ready." Marcus looked up from where he was setting the table, and Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks at his appreciative glance. Clean and in clothes that fit, she suddenly felt self-conscious about her appearance. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Much, thank you." Emma took the chair he indicated, accepting a glass of what looked like fresh lemonade. "This is a beautiful home. My great-grandfather built the original house," Marcus said, pride evident in his voice. "Each generation added to it. The kitchen was my grandmother's project. She said she wasn't cooking for ranch hands in some tiny galley." "How big is the ranch?" Emma asked. "About 5,000 acres. We run cattle and horses, some hay fields in the irrigated sections. It's not the biggest operation in the valley, but it's been sustaining the family for over a century." Maria set a platter of what looked like the best pot roast Emma had ever seen in the center of the table, followed by bowls of vegetables that had obviously been grown in the garden. Emma had glimpsed behind the house. "This is incredible," Emma said after her first bite. "I can't remember the last time I had a home-cooked meal." "Where are you from, Mia?" Maria asked gently. Emma hesitated, then decided these people had earned honesty. "Phoenix, originally. But I've been living in Las Vegas for the past 2 years." "Vegas?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way from here. What brought you to Nevada in the first place?" "My fiancé got a job there," Emma replied. surprised at how little the word fiancé hurt now. I followed him, got work as a teacher in the Clark County school system, and now. Maria's voice was carefully neutral. Now there's no fiancé, and school doesn't start again until fall. Emma took another bite of pot roast, buying time. I needed some time to figure out what comes next. Marcus nodded as if this made perfect sense. Sometimes the best way to figure out where you're going is to stop trying so hard to get there. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, punctuated by Maria's gentle questions about Emma's family and background. Emma found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, talking about her parents' small restaurant in Phoenix, her decision to become a teacher, her love of working with children. "Do you miss it?" Marcus asked. "Teaching? I do," Emma admitted. "But the job market in Las Vegas is tough, and after everything that happened," she shrugged. "I thought maybe a change of scenery would help." "What do you teach?" "Third grade, 8 and 9-year-olds. They're at this perfect age where they're still excited about learning, but old enough to really engage with ideas." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "I bet you're good at it. What makes you say that?" "The way you talk about the kids, like you really see them as individuals, not just a classroom full of problems to manage." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. David had never understood her passion for teaching, had always seen it as something she'd give up once they were married and started their real life together. After dinner, Marcus insisted on walking her out to see the horses. Rusty limped along beside them, seemingly content now that his mission was accomplished. The evening air was cooling, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the vast sky overhead. "It's so quiet," Emma marveled, leaning against the corral fence as the horses approached curiously. "Too quiet for some people," Marcus said. "My ex-fiancée used to complain that the silence kept her awake." Emma glanced at him. "Maria mentioned that you'd been engaged." Marcus nodded, his expression carefully neutral. 3 years ago, Caroline was from Boston, worked in marketing. We met when she came out here for a conference in Reno." He reached over the fence to stroke the nose of a curious mare. "She was everything I thought I wanted. Sophisticated, educated, beautiful. I convinced myself love was enough to bridge our differences. What happened? She came out here for the wedding, took one look at the ranch, and realized she couldn't do it. Said she'd tried to picture herself living here, but it felt like being buried alive." Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact, but Emma could hear the old hurt underneath. "She was right to leave. It would have been miserable for both of us." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "Don't be. We wanted different things. She needed the city, the energy, the constant stimulation. He gestured toward the mountains, the star-filled sky, the peaceful ranch stretching around them. Emma looked out at the landscape, understanding exactly what he meant. There was something healing about the vastness, the sense of being part of something larger and more permanent than the small dramas of human life. "David, my ex-fiancé, he never understood why I wanted to teach," she found herself saying. "He kept talking about my potential, as if working with children was somehow beneath me." "What did he want you to do? Get an MBA, go into business with him?" "He had all these plans for our future that somehow never included asking what I wanted." Emma realized she was gripping the fence rail tightly, and forced herself to relax. "I think he saw me as a project, something to be improved and optimized. Some people can't appreciate what's right in front of them," Marcus said quietly. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the horses settle for the night. Emma felt a peace descending that she hadn't experienced in months. The ranch felt like a place outside of time, where the urgent problems of the modern world couldn't quite reach. "I should probably call about my car tomorrow," she said eventually. "We'll take a look at it first thing," Marcus agreed. "But Emma," he turned to face her directly, "there's no rush. You're welcome to stay as long as you need to figure things out." Emma studied his face in the starlight, looking for some hidden agenda, some sign that this kindness came with strings attached. All she saw was genuine concern, and something that might have been loneliness, recognizing loneliness. "Why?" she asked simply. Marcus looked down at Rusty, who had settled himself at their feet. "Because that dog's never wrong about people," he said. "And because sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need, even when you don't realize you need it." As they walked back toward the house, Emma felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about what came next, wasn't planning her escape route, or analyzing potential problems. She was simply present in this moment, in this place, with these people who had welcomed her without question. Maria was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a plate of cookies that smelled like heaven. "For your room," she explained, pressing them into Emma's hands, "in case you get hungry later." "Thank you," Emma said, impulsively hugging the older woman. "For everything." "Sleep well, Mia," Maria replied, patting her cheek. "Tomorrow will bring what it brings." In the blue room, Emma sat in the rocking chair by the window, sipping tea and watching the lights of the ranch settle into evening quiet. Rusty had followed her upstairs, and now lay contentedly on the rug beside her chair, as if standing guard. She thought about the events of the day, how a broken radiator and a limping dog had led her to this place of unexpected sanctuary. For months, she'd felt like she was drowning, struggling to keep her head above water, as everything she'd built her life around collapsed. Now for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. Emma had no idea what tomorrow would bring, whether her car could be fixed, where she would go next, or how she would rebuild her life. But sitting in this peaceful room, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a ranch settling into night, those questions didn't seem quite so urgent. Outside her window, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly, under a canopy of stars brighter than any she'd ever seen in the city. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its voice wild and free, and in the room below, she could hear the low murmur of Marcus and Maria's voices, as they finished cleaning up from dinner, the comfortable sounds of people who had found their place in the world. For the first time in months, Emma fell asleep without crying, without planning, without fear. She simply let herself rest, trusting that whatever had brought her here would guide her through whatever came next. Emma woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance. For a moment, she lay disoriented in the unfamiliar bed, sunlight streaming through blue curtains onto walls she didn't recognize. Then memory flooded back, the broken car, Rusty's amber eyes, Marcus Wilde's unexpected kindness. She checked her phone, and was startled to see it was already 8:30. In Las Vegas, she'd been a habitual early riser, up at 6 to beat the desert heat during her morning runs. Here, the mountain air remained cool, even as the sun climbed higher, and she'd slept more deeply than she had in months. Voices drifted up from the kitchen below, along with the smell of bacon and coffee. Emma dressed quickly in Maria's borrowed clothes, and made her way downstairs, following the sounds of conversation. She found Marcus at the kitchen table, with a cup of coffee, and what looked like ranch ledgers spread before him. He'd obviously been up for hours, his hair was damp from a recent shower, and he wore fresh work clothes that somehow managed to make him look even more attractive than he had the night before. "Morning," he said, looking up with a smile that made Emma's stomach flutter, in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. "Sleep well, better than I have in weeks," Emma admitted, accepting the cup of coffee Maria pressed into her hands. "I can't remember the last time I slept past 7. Mountain air," Maria said with satisfaction. "It's God's own sleeping medicine. Now sit, breakfast is almost ready." Emma took the chair across from Marcus, trying not to stare at the way his forearms looked in his rolled-up sleeves. She'd always been attracted to David's polished sophistication, his expensive suits, his manicured hands, his gym-sculpted physique. But there was something appealing about Marcus's natural strength, the kind that came from years of physical work rather than hours in a fitness center. "I called Pete Rodriguez this morning," Marcus said, closing the ledger he'd been reviewing. "He's retired now, but he still tinkers with engines as a hobby. He'll come take a look at your car this afternoon." "Rodriguez," Emma raised an eyebrow. "Any relation?" Marcus grinned. "Could be. It's a common name around here. Pete's family's been in the valley almost as long as mine. I appreciate you calling him, but I should probably just have it towed to Reno. I don't want to impose on someone's retirement." "You're not imposing," Marcus said firmly. "Pete loves an excuse to get his hands dirty, and he knows more about engines than most certified mechanics. Besides, towing it to Reno would cost you a fortune." Emma wanted to argue, but the truth was her savings were limited. The money she'd managed to retrieve from her and David's joint accounts wouldn't last long if she had to pay for expensive repairs and towing fees. "What kind of car?" Pete's voice came from the kitchen doorway, making Emma jump. She turned to see a man in his 70s with silver hair and oil-stained hands grinning at her with obvious curiosity. "Uncle Pete," Marcus said with affection. "You made good time." Couldn't sleep thinking about a puzzle to solve, Pete replied, removing his baseball cap as he approached Emma. Pete Rodriguez, at your service, young lady. Emma Rodriguez, she said, shaking his weathered hand. And it's a 2018 Honda Civic. The radiator overheated yesterday on Highway 287. Pete nodded thoughtfully. Hondas are good cars, reliable. What were your warning signs before it gave out? Emma found herself drawn into a surprisingly detailed conversation about automotive maintenance. Pete's questions were thorough and intelligent, and she realized Marcus had been right about his expertise. Within minutes, the older man had formed a preliminary diagnosis. Sounds like a bad thermostat to me, Pete concluded. Maybe a leak in the radiator, but could just be a stuck valve. Won't know for sure until I get under the hood. What would something like that cost to fix? Emma asked, bracing herself for bad news. Pete waved a dismissive hand. Parts for a Honda are cheap, and labor's free since I'm doing it for Marcus. Figure $50 at most, assuming I'm right about the thermostat. Emma stared at him. I can't let you do that for free. Sure you can, Pete said cheerfully. Consider it a welcome gift. Besides, Marcus helped me roof my barn last spring, and I never did pay him back properly. After breakfast, the three of them drove out to Emma's car in Marcus's pickup truck. Rusty rode in the bed, his golden coat gleaming in the morning sunshine, seemingly none the worse for his adventure the day before. Emma's Honda sat exactly where she'd left it, looking forlorn on the shoulder of the empty highway. Pete popped the hood and began his examination while Marcus and Emma watched. Yep, thermostat's stuck all right, Pete announced after a few minutes. Radiator's fine, just overheated because the coolant couldn't circulate. I can have this fixed in an hour if you've got a ride back to town for parts. I'll drive you, Marcus offered immediately. As they headed toward the nearest auto parts store, Emma found herself relaxing in the passenger seat of Marcus's truck. Country music played softly on the radio, and the landscape rolling past the windows was breathtaking. Vast expanses of sagebrush punctuated by dramatic rock formations and distant mountain peaks. It's beautiful out here, she said, watching a hawk circle overhead. So different from the city. You ever spend much time in rural areas? Marcus asked. Some. My grandparents had a small farm outside Phoenix when I was growing up. I used to spend summers there. Emma smiled at the memory. My grandmother taught me to ride horses and milk cows. My grandfather showed me how to read weather patterns and identify animal tracks. Sounds like good grandparents. The best. They died when I was in college and my parents sold the farm. Emma's voice carried a note of old sadness. I always regretted that I couldn't keep it in the family, but I was just a kid with student loans and no way to make the payments. Marcus glanced at her with understanding. It's hard when family land has to go to strangers. They spent the drive into town talking easily about everything and nothing. Emma's teaching experiences, Marcus's stories about growing up on the ranch, their shared love of old movies and country music. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months, surprised by Marcus's dry sense of humor and the way he listened when she talked, as if her words actually mattered to him. The auto parts store turned out to be a tiny operation run by a woman named Betty who seemed to know Marcus's entire family history. She insisted on hearing the story of how Emma had come to be at the ranch, and when Marcus mentioned Rusty's role, Betty nodded knowingly. That dog's got a gift, she declared, ringing up the thermostat. My nephew Danny was the one got stuck in that wash last spring. If Rusty hadn't found him and led him to your place, he might have died out there. What exactly happened? Emma asked, curious about the other people Rusty had rescued. Betty launched into a detailed account of how Danny's RV had been swept off the road during a flash flood, how he'd spent 2 days trying to dig it out before Rusty appeared and led him to safety. The story was remarkably similar to Emma's own experience, the dog appearing at exactly the right moment, somehow knowing that person needed help. It's like he can sense when people are lost, Betty concluded. Not just physically lost either, emotionally lost, spiritually lost. That dog's got wisdom most humans never develop. On the drive back to Emma's car, she found herself thinking about Betty's words. Had she been lost when Rusty found her? Certainly physically better older, her car had broken down in the middle of nowhere, but maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe she'd been lost in ways she hadn't even realized. Pete had the car running within an hour just as he'd promised. The Honda purged contentedly, showing no signs of its previous distress. Good as new, Pete announced. wiping his hands on a rag. Should give you another 100,000 miles easy. Emma insisted on paying him something, but the most he would accept was $20 for his time. As she started the engine and listened to it run smoothly, she felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Her car was fixed, she could leave whenever she wanted. The question was, did she want to? Follow us back to the ranch, Marcus suggested. We can get your things loaded up whenever you're ready to head out. Emma nodded, but as she drove behind Marcus's pickup, she found herself hoping for another breakdown, another excuse to stay in this place that had begun to feel like a refuge. Back at the ranch, Maria had prepared a lunch that could have fed a small army. Pete joined them, regaling Emma with stories about the valley's history and the various characters who'd lived there over the decades. This land's got a way of calling to certain people, he said, gesturing toward the mountains visible through the kitchen windows. My great-grandfather came here from Mexico in 1890, planning to work for a season and move on, never left. Something about this place gets into your blood. What about people who don't belong here? Emma asked, thinking of Marcus's ex-fiancée. How do you know if you're meant to stay or meant to move on? Pete considered this seriously. Well, I figure if the land wants you, it'll find a way to keep you, and if it doesn't, it'll send you on your way gentle-like, no hard feelings. After lunch, Marcus offered to show Emma around the ranch properly. They walked through the barn, where she met the horses individually, and learned their names and personalities. There was Thunder, the black stallion who served as the ranch's primary breeding sire, gentle despite his imposing size. Moonbeam, an elderly mare who'd been Marcus's childhood horse and now enjoyed a comfortable retirement. A handful of younger horses in various stages of training, each with their own quirks and characteristics. Do you breed them for specific purposes? Emma asked, watching Marcus interact with each animal. It was clear they all knew and trusted him completely. Mostly ranch work and trail riding, Marcus explained. Some folks around here still prefer horses to ATVs for checking fence lines and moving cattle, and there's a growing market for trail horses, city people who want to experience the authentic West for a week or two. They moved on to the cattle operation, which was smaller than Emma had expected but clearly well managed. Marcus explained the seasonal rhythms of ranch life: spring calving, summer grazing in the high pastures, fall roundups, winter feeding. It was a cycle that had remained essentially unchanged for generations, requiring skills and knowledge passed down from parent to child. Did you always know you wanted to be a rancher? Emma asked, as they walked among the gentle-eyed cattle. Never wanted to be anything else, Marcus replied. My dad used to joke that I was born with hay in my hair and horse sense in my head. Even as a kid I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. It must have been hard when your parents died, Emma said gently. Marcus's expression grew somber. Hardest thing I've ever been through. They were driving back from a Ranchers Association meeting in Denver, when a drunk driver crossed the center line. Killed instantly, both of them. I'm so sorry, thanks. It was 3 years ago, right before Caroline and I were supposed to get married. She'd been having doubts about ranch life already, and losing my parents it made everything seem more real to her, I guess. The isolation, the risks, the fact that out here you really only have each other to depend on. Emma could hear the pain in his voice, carefully controlled but still raw around the edges. She left right after the funeral, 2 weeks later, said she couldn't handle being responsible for someone else's happiness when life was so unpredictable. Marcus picked up a piece of wire from the ground and began straightening it absently. Can't say I blamed her. Death has a way of clarifying what you really want from life. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. Emma found herself studying Marcus's profile, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into bright sunlight, the easy way he moved through the landscape as if he were as much a part of it as the sagebrush and the mountains. What about you? Marcus asked eventually. Did you always want to teach? Always, Emma confirmed. Even as a little girl, I was lining up my dolls and stuffed animals to play school. My parents thought I'd outgrow it, but I never did. There's something magical about watching a child's face when they finally understand a concept they've been struggling with. Sounds like you're good at it. I was, Emma said, then corrected herself. I am. I love it. But David never understood that. He saw teaching as something I was doing temporarily,
until we got married and I could focus on more important things. Like what? His business ventures, social climbing, making the right connections. Emma kicked at a clump of grass. He had this whole vision of what our life would look like. The right neighborhood, the right friends, the right kind of parties. Children were part of the plan, eventually, but only after I'd helped him build his empire. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. What kind of business? Real estate development. He was always chasing the next big project, the next opportunity to make it rich, except he wasn't very good at it, and he started gambling to try to make up for his losses. Emma felt the familiar anger rise in her chest. I found out he'd been using our wedding fund to cover his debts. Ah, Marcus said quietly. That's why you left. That's why I left. He wanted me to ask my parents for more money, to lie to them about why we needed it. When I refused, he said I was being selfish, that married couples were supposed to support each other no matter what. Support and enabling aren't the same thing, Marcus observed. Emma looked at him in surprise. That's exactly what my mother said when I finally told her what happened. They had reached the edge of the ranch property, where the fenced pasture gave way to open desert. Marcus leaned against a fence post and gestured toward the vast landscape stretching before them. See all that, he said. My great-grandfather claimed this land with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone thought possible. He built something lasting, something he could pass down to his children and their children. That's what marriage should be like. Two people building something together that's bigger than either of them could create alone. Emma found herself nodding. David and I weren't building anything together. I was just supposed to help him build his dream. And what's your dream? Marcus asked, his blue eyes serious as they met hers. Emma opened her mouth to answer, then realized she didn't know. For so long, her dreams had been tangled up with David's plans, her own desires subsumed into his grand vision of their future. Teaching, yes, but what else? What kind of life did she want for herself? I don't know, she admitted. I've been so focused on escaping from what I didn't want, I haven't thought much about what I do want. Maybe that's what you're really here for, Marcus suggested. To figure that out. They walked back toward the house as the sun began to sink toward the western mountains. Emma felt a curious lightness in her chest, as if some weight she'd been carrying had been lifted. The future that had seemed so terrifying and uncertain that morning now felt full of possibilities. Maria was waiting for them with fresh lemonade and homemade cookies, insisting they sit on the porch to enjoy the evening air. Rusty appeared from wherever he'd been napping and settled himself between Emma and Marcus's chairs, as if claiming them both as his pack. So Maria said with studied casualness as she settled into her own rocking chair, "When do you think you'll be heading out, Emma?" Emma glanced at Marcus, who was carefully not looking at her. "I'm not sure," she said slowly. "My car's fixed, so I could leave any time. But I don't really have anywhere urgent to be. School doesn't start until fall, you said. Not until late August, and I'd need to find a new job anyway since I was planning to move back to Phoenix after."
Emma trailed off. "After the wedding that didn't happen," Maria finished gently. "And now you're free to go wherever you want." "I suppose I am." They rocked in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. A barn owl called from somewhere nearby, and the evening breeze carried the scent of sage and wild flowers. "You know," Marcus said suddenly, "we're coming up on our busiest season. Summer's when we move the cattle to the high pastures, and I usually hire a couple of temporary hands to help out." Emma's heart jumped, but she kept her voice carefully neutral. "Oh, pays not much, but it includes room and board. And Maria's always complaining that she needs help with the garden and the preserving." Marcus glanced at her sideways. "Course it's hard work, long days, early mornings. Not everyone's cut out for ranch life. What kind of help would you need?" Emma asked, trying not to sound too eager. "General ranch work, mending fence, moving cattle, helping with the horses. Some of it requires riding, but I could teach you if you're rusty." "I'm not rusty," Emma said, remembering her summers on her grandparents'. "I might be out of practice, but I know my way around horses." Maria smiled knowingly. "And I certainly could use help in the kitchen and the garden. These men eat enough for a small army, and my arthritis makes it hard to keep up with the preserving." Emma looked between them, seeing the kindness in their eyes and recognizing the gift they were offering her. A chance to stay, to figure out what she wanted from life, to be useful while she healed from the wounds of her broken engagement. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You barely know me." "We know enough," Marcus said firmly. "You're honest, you're not afraid of hard work, and Rusty brought you here. That's recommendation enough for me." Emma felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Maria urged. "Say you'll stay for the summer and help us out." Emma looked out at the vast landscape stretching toward the mountains, at the peaceful ranch that had welcomed her when she'd had nowhere else to go, at the two people who'd shown her more kindness in 24 hours than she'd experienced in months of living with David. She said, her voice stronger than she'd expected. "I'd like that very much." Marcus's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Good, we'll get you set up properly tomorrow. Maria can show you where everything is, and I'll start teaching you our routines. And if you change your mind," Maria added, though her tone suggested she wasn't worried about that possibility, "your car's running fine. You can leave any time you want." But as Emma sat on the porch watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, with Rusty's warm weight against her legs, and the sound of Marcus and Maria's easy conversation washing over her, leaving was the last thing on her mind. For the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn to the sound of activity outside her window. Looking out, she could see Marcus and another man loading supplies into a pickup truck, their movements efficient in the pre-dawn darkness. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where she found Maria already busy in the kitchen, packing what looked like enough food for an expedition. "Morning, Mia," Maria said without looking up from the sandwich assembly line she'd created on the counter. "Marcus is taking cattle up to summer pasture today. You said you wanted to learn ranch work. This is where it starts." Emma felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. "Am I going with them?" "If you want to. It's a long day in the saddle, and the work's not easy, but it's the best way to see what ranch life is really like." Through the kitchen window, Emma could see Marcus saddling horses in the pre-dawn light. He moved with the kind of unconscious competence that came from years of practice, every motion economical and sure. "I want to go," Emma said, surprising herself with her certainty. Maria smiled approvingly. "Good. You'll need these." She handed Emma a pair of well-worn leather work gloves and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. "The sun gets brutal in the high country, and your hands will thank you for the protection." Emma grabbed a quick breakfast and headed out to the barn, where Marcus was finishing with the horses. In the growing light, she could see the other man Maria had mentioned, a lean, weathered cowboy who looked to be in his 50s. "Emma," Marcus said, looking up as she approached, "meet Jake Morrison. He's been helping with cattle drives on this ranch longer than I've been alive." Jake touched the brim of his hat politely. "Ma'am, heard you might be joining us today, if that's all right," Emma said, suddenly aware of how inexperienced she must seem to these men who'd been doing this work their entire lives. "More than all right," Jake assured her. "We can use the help, and it's always good to have fresh eyes on the herd." Marcus led a gentle-looking mare toward Emma. "This is Daisy. She's been on more cattle drives than most cowboys. She'll take good care of you." Emma approached the horse slowly, letting Daisy sniff her hand before stroking the mare. The horse was smaller than Thunder, but had kind eyes and a calm presence that immediately put Emma at ease. "How long since you've been on a horse?" Marcus asked, as he adjusted the stirrups to fit Emma's shorter legs. "About 5 years, Emma admitted. "I used to ride regularly when I was younger, but life got in the way." "It'll come back to you," Marcus assured her. "Daisy's got smooth gaits and good sense. Just trust her and try to relax." As the sun crested the eastern mountains, the small group set out toward the high pastures. Emma felt awkward at first, her muscles remembering the rhythm of riding, but protesting the unaccustomed exercise. But Marcus had been right about Daisy. The mare was smooth and steady, seemingly content to follow the other horses at whatever pace Emma felt comfortable with. The cattle they were moving were scattered across several miles of lower pasture, browsing contentedly in the early morning coolness. Emma watched in fascination as Marcus and Jake worked together with an efficiency born of long practice, using their horses and their voices to gently encourage the herd to move in the right direction. "Stay on the outside," Marcus called to Emma as a few young steers tried to break away from the group. "Don't try to turn them, just be a presence that keeps them with the herd." Emma did as he instructed, marveling at how Daisy seemed to know exactly what was needed. The mare positioned herself to block the steer's escape route without Emma having to guide her, responding to pressure from Emma's legs and shifts in her weight. The work was harder than Emma had expected. The cattle were generally cooperative, but there were always a few individuals determined to go their own way. The sun climbed higher as the morning progressed, and Emma was grateful for Maria's hat and the cooling breeze that swept down from the mountains. By mid-morning, they had the herd moving steadily toward the high pastures. Emma found herself falling into the rhythm of the work, anticipating the cattle's movements and working with Daisy to keep stragglers with the group. "You're doing good," Jake called to her during a brief rest while the cattle watered at a stream. "Got good instincts for someone who's been away from it." Emma felt a flush of pride at the compliment. She was hot, tired, and already sore from the unaccustomed riding, but she was also exhilarated in a way she hadn't felt in years. There was something deeply satisfying about this work, the cooperation between human and horse, the challenge of reading the cattle's movements, the simple pleasure of being outdoors in the vast landscape. "How much farther?" she asked Marcus as he rode up beside her. "Ways prard. Doa," to said. "Another couple of hours to the summer pasture," he replied. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," Emma admitted. "I'd forgotten how much I love being on horseback." Marcus's smile was warm with approval. "I can tell, you've got a natural seat, and Daisy likes you. That's not always easy to earn." The high pasture, when they finally reached it, was breathtaking. A vast meadow dotted with wild flowers stretched between towering peaks, with a clear stream running through the center and stands of aspen trees providing shade. The air was thin and sweet, scented with pine and mountain flowers. "This is where they'll spend the summer," Marcus explained as they watched the cattle spread out across the rich grass. "The grazing up here is some of the best in the state, and they'll put on good weight before we bring them back down in the fall." They spent the afternoon checking fence lines and making sure the water sources were clean and flowing properly. Emma learned to spot signs of wildlife: these oak tracks in the mud near the stream, claw marks on aspen trees where bears had passed through, eagle nests in the high crags. "It's like a different world up here," she said as they rode through a grove of aspen trees, whose leaves shimmered like silver coins in the air. My favorite place on earth," Marcus agreed. "When I was a kid, I used to beg my dad to let me come up here with the cattle every summer. There's something about this elevation that makes everything seem clearer, more possible." They made camp that evening beside the stream, cooking dinner over an open fire, and listening to the cattle settle for the night. Jake entertained them with stories of past cattle drives, including several adventures involving storms, predators, and cattle with minds of their own. "Worst drive I ever did was about 15 years ago," Jake said, poking at the fire with a stick. "Early blizzard caught us on the way down from summer pasture. Lost visibility completely. Temperature dropped 40 degrees in 2 hours. We had to hunker down and wait it out, but half the herd scattered." "Did you find them all?" Emma asked. "Eventually. Took 3 days of searching every canyon and draw in a 50-mile radius." Marcus's dad organized the whole valley. Every rancher for miles around turned out to help look for strays. Emma glanced at Marcus, who was staring into the fire with a thoughtful expression. "That's what I love about this place," he said quietly. "When trouble comes, people don't ask questions, they just show up to help." As full darkness fell, the sky above them filled with more stars than Emma had ever seen. The Milky Way stretched from horizon to horizon in a glowing arc that seemed close enough to touch. "Light pollution in the city makes it impossible to see this," she murmured, lying back on her bedroll to get a better view. "First time I went to Las Vegas, I couldn't sleep," Marcus said, settling beside her. "Too much artificial light, too much noise, made me appreciate what we have out here." They lay in comfortable silence, watching for shooting stars and listening to the night sounds of the mountains, the distant call of a great horned owl, the whisper of wind through the aspens, the contented lowing of cattle settling for sleep. Emma felt a peace descending that she hadn't experienced in years. The physical tiredness from the long day's work was satisfying rather than exhausting, and her mind felt quieter than it had since before her engagement had fallen apart. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, not trusting herself to look at him, in case he could see too much in her expression. "For what?"
for letting me come today, for giving me a chance to remember who I used to be before I got lost in someone else's plans for my life." Marcus was quiet for so long that Emma wondered if he'd fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft in the darkness. "I think maybe we're helping each other remember," he said. "I'd forgotten how good it feels to share this place with someone who really sees it." Emma turned her head to look at him. Then his profile silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition that went deeper than physical attraction or simple companionship. They were two people who'd been hurt by love, who'd given their hearts to the wrong people, and had them handed back damaged. But here, under the vast canopy of stars with the work of the day behind them, and the promise of tomorrow ahead, Emma felt the stirring of something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The August heat was merciless, even at elevation. Emma wiped sweat from her forehead, as she and Marcus worked to repair a section of fence that a fallen tree had damaged during the previous night's thunderstorm. 3 months of ranch work had transformed her soft city hands into capable ones, calloused and strong from daily labor. "Hand me that wire stretcher," Marcus said, not looking up from the post he was bracing. Their communication had become wordless over the weeks, each anticipating what the other needed before it was asked. Emma passed him the tool, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Even that simple contact sent electricity up her arm, a reaction that had only grown stronger as the summer progressed. She'd tried to convince herself it was just proximity, just the natural result of working closely with an attractive man in an isolated setting, but she knew it was more than that. "Storm's rolling in again," Marcus observed, glancing toward the western peaks where dark clouds were building. "We should finish this section and head back." They worked in companionable silence, the kind of easy partnership that had developed between them over countless shared tasks. Emma had proven herself capable of everything from mucking stalls to delivering a breached calf, earning not just Marcus's respect but his trust. More than once she'd caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something that went beyond professional appreciation. The first drops of rain began to fall just as they secured the final wire. They gathered their tools quickly and mounted their horses, racing the storm back toward the ranch buildings. Thunder rolled across the valley behind them, and lightning illuminated the approaching wall of rain. They made it to the barn just as the heavens opened, both of them breathless and laughing as they led their horses inside. Emma's shirt was soaked through, clinging to her in ways that made Marcus quickly look away while she stripped the saddle from Daisy. "That was close," Emma said, shaking water from her hair. She'd stopped wearing it in the neat buns she'd favored in Las Vegas, letting it fall loose around her shoulders in a way that made Marcus's hands itch to touch it. "Summer storms move fast up here," he replied, his voice rougher than usual. "You did good work today." That fence line was tricky. Emma felt the familiar glow of accomplishment that came with his praise. In her teaching career, she'd been competent and well regarded, but she'd never felt the deep satisfaction that came from this physical work, this direct contribution to something larger than herself. "I love it," she said simply, "all of it. I never thought I'd say that about manual labor, but there's something so honest about ranch work." Marcus finished brushing down thunder and the dim light of the barn, with rain drumming on the roof above them. Something shifted in the air between them. Emma felt her breath catch as he took a step closer. "Emma," he said, her name rough on his lips. Before she could respond, the barn door burst open and Jake stumbled in, soaked to the skin and grinning. "Hell of a storm," he announced, apparently oblivious to the moment he'd interrupted. "Caught me halfway across the south pasture." Marcus stepped back immediately. The spell broken, Emma busied herself with hanging up her saddle, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and something that felt dangerously close to disappointment. That evening, the three of them sat on the covered porch watching the storm rage across the valley. Maria had made her famous chicken and dumplings, comfort food perfect for the weather, and Jake entertained them with stories of storms he'd weathered over the year. "Worst one I remember was back in '98, he said, rocking gently in his chair. "Tornado came through, missed the house by maybe 100 yards, took out half the hay barn and scattered cattle from here to Utah. I remember that storm," Marcus said. "I was 12, scared out of my mind." My dad made me help round up the scattered cattle for weeks afterward. Emma found herself studying Marcus's profile in the lamplight, noting the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strong line of his jaw, the gentle way he absently scratched Rusty's ears. The dog had taken to lying between their chairs every evening, as if ensuring they stayed close together. When Jake finally headed to the bunkhouse and Maria retired to her room, Emma and Marcus were left alone with the storm. The rain had gentled to a steady patter, and the worst of the thunder had moved on toward the eastern mountains.
"I should probably turn in too," Emma said, though she made no move to get up from her chair. Probably Marcus agreed, but he didn't move either. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rain and the distant lowing of cattle settling for the night. Emma felt the weight of unspoken words between them, feelings that had been building all summer but never quite acknowledged. "Emma," Marcus said finally, his voice careful, "I need to ask you something." Her heart jumped. "What? What happens at the end of the summer? When the work winds down and you don't need to be here anymore?" The question she'd been dreading, the one she'd been avoiding thinking about even as September grew closer. Her savings from the summer work weren't substantial, but they were enough to get her back to Phoenix, to start over in a new school district, to rebuild the life she'd planned before David. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I haven't let myself think that far ahead." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've been wondering because I don't want you to go." Emma's breath caught. "Marcus, I know this wasn't part of the deal," he continued quickly. "I know you came here to figure out what you wanted from life, not to get tangled up with another man. But I can't pretend I don't care about you." Emma turned to face him fully, seeing vulnerability in his expression that made her chest tight. "I care about you too. More than I should, probably." "Why more than you should?" "Because I just got out of an engagement. Because I'm supposed to be focusing on myself, figuring out my own path. Because I swore I wouldn't let my life get derailed by feelings for someone else again." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "And have they derailed your life?" Emma considered this seriously. 3 months ago she would have said yes without hesitation, but looking back on the summer she realized that falling for Marcus hadn't made her lose herself the way falling for David had. If anything, it had helped her find parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. "No," she said slowly, "they haven't, but that scares me almost more than if they had." "Why?" "Because it means this is real. What I feel for you, what we've built here together. It's not just gratitude or loneliness or rebound attraction. It's real, and real things can hurt you." Marcus reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. His palm was warm and call-used, familiar now after months of working beside him. "Emma, I can't promise I won't hurt you. I can't promise this will work out the way we hope. But I can promise that I'll never ask you to be anyone other than who you are. I've watched you this summer, and you're stronger and braver and more capable than you give yourself credit for. Any man who can't see that doesn't deserve you." Emma felt tears threaten at his words. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to stay. Not just for the rest of the summer, but stay. Help me run this ranch, build something with me." "As what? Your employee? Your girlfriend?" Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his face. "As my partner, in every sense of the word." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. It was everything she wanted and everything she was afraid to want. The chance to stay in this place that had become home, to continue the work that fulfilled her, to build a life with a man who saw her for who she really was. "The Valley School District is looking for a teacher," Marcus continued. "Mrs. Patterson's retiring after 40 years. It's only a 2-room schoolhouse, kindergarten through 8th grade, but..." "You looked into it?" Emma interrupted, touched that he'd thought about how she could continue her teaching career. "I might have made some inquiries. The pay's not much, but the ranch income would supplement it, and you'd still be doing what you love." Emma stared at him, overwhelmed by the picture he was painting. A life where she could teach children, work the land, be part of a community that valued what she had to offer. "What about your ex-fiancé?" she asked. "You said she couldn't handle ranch life." "Caroline wanted me to be someone I wasn't," Marcus replied. "She wanted the idea of a cowboy, not the reality of ranch life." "You've lived the reality for 3 months, and you're still here." "Still here and covered in horsehair and smelling like cattle," Emma said with a shaky laugh. "Still here and more beautiful than the day you arrived," Marcus corrected softly. Emma looked out at the storm-washed landscape, at the ranch that had become home, at the man who'd helped her remember who she was meant to be. The safe choice would be to leave at the end of summer, to go back to Phoenix and start over with lessons learned. But safety had never brought her the kind of joy she'd found here. "The school year starts in 2 weeks," she said. "It does. I'd need to interview, get certified in Nevada. Pete's on the school board, he could probably expedite the process." Emma laughed, recognizing the network of favors and connections that kept small communities functioning. "You've thought of everything." "I've had time to think. Long nights watching the stars and wondering if you'd stay if I asked." Emma squeezed his hand. "Yes, you'll stay. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll interview for the teaching job. Yes, I'll be your partner." She paused, her heart full to bursting. Yes to all of it. Marcus's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He stood and pulled her up with him, wrapping his arms around her waist as the last of the storm clouds cleared to reveal stars beginning to emerge. "I love you, Emma Rodriguez," he said, the word she'd been afraid to hope for. "I love you too, Marcus Wilde," she replied, standing on her toes to meet his kiss. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, the kind of kiss that sealed agreements and started new chapters. When they finally broke apart, Rusty was sitting at their feet, tail wagging as if he'd orchestrated the entire thing. "Think he knew?" Emma asked, looking down at the dog who'd brought them together. "I think Rusty knows a lot more than he lets on," Marcus replied, scratching the dog's ear. "He's never wrong about people, remember." 2 weeks later, Emma stood in front of a classroom full of eager faces, ranging in age from 5 to 14. The Valley Elementary School was indeed a 2-room schoolhouse, with wide windows that looked out on the same mountains she'd grown to love. "Good morning, class," she said, feeling the familiar thrill of a new school year beginning. "My name is Miss Rodriguez, and I'm very excited to be your new teacher." A small hand shot up in the front row. "Miss Rodriguez, do you live on Mr. Wilde's ranch?" Emma smiled, unsurprised that everyone in the valley already knew her story. "I do. Are you going to marry him?" asked another student, this one older and bolder. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, but her smile widened. "We'll see about that." After school she drove home to the ranch in the truck Marcus had insisted on buying for her, arguing that she needed reliable transportation for the winter months ahead. The word home still felt new and precious on her tongue, but it was accurate. The ranch was home now in a way no place had ever been. She found Marcus in the barn, working with a young horse that had been giving him trouble. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting up in the way that never failed to make her heart skip. "How was the first day?" he asked, not stopping his work with the colt. "Perfect, challenging but perfect. I have 23 students from 7 different grade levels, and they're all convinced they know everything about our relationship." Marcus grinned. "Small town, no secrets." "Apparently not." Emma leaned against the stall door, watching him work. One of them asked if we were getting married. Marcus's hand stilled on the lead rope. "What did you tell them? That we'd see?" Marcus stepped closer to the stall door, his blue eyes serious. "And what would you tell them if I asked you properly?" Emma's breath caught. "Are you asking me properly?" Marcus handed the lead rope to Jake, who'd appeared as if summoned. "Take over for a minute." Jake accepted the rope with a knowing grin. About time. Marcus led Emma outside, where the evening sun was painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Rusty appeared from wherever he'd been napping, and took his usual position between them. "Emma Rodriguez," Marcus said, dropping to one knee on the dusty ground, "will you marry me?" Emma laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have a ring." "Don't need one for the asking," Marcus replied. "I can get a ring. The question is whether you want one." Emma thought about David's elaborate proposal in an expensive restaurant, complete with a ring that had cost more than most people's cars. It had been performance, designed to impress rather than express genuine feeling. This dusty, heartfelt proposal in front of a barn, with a dog as witness and the mountains as backdrop, was everything that one hadn't been. Real, honest and perfect for who they'd become together. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, I want a ring, and yes, I want to marry you." Marcus spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, Rusty barked in apparent approval. "Think the kids will be satisfied with that answer?" Marcus asked. "I think the kids are going to be planning our wedding for us," Emma replied. "Small town, remember." 6 months later, the entire valley turned out for their wedding at the ranch. Emma wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit by Maria's skillful hands. Marcus wore his best suit and boots that Jake had polished to a mirror shine. The ceremony took place on the same porch where they'd first acknowledged their feelings for each other, with Reverend Patterson officiating and Rusty serving as unofficial ring bearer. The dog had been brushed until he gleamed, a white ribbon around his neck that he tolerated with surprising dignity. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Patterson began, "we are gathered here today to celebrate a love that began with a chance encounter and grew into something beautiful and lasting." Emma caught Marcus's eye and smiled, remembering that first day when she'd thought following a stray dog into the desert was the worst decision she could make. It had turned out to be the best decision of her life. "Do you, Marcus, take Emma to be your wife, to love and cherish through all the seasons of life on this land?" "I do," Marcus said, his voice strong and sure. "Do you, Emma, take Marcus to be your husband, to build a life together on this ranch, in good times and challenging ones?" "I do," Emma replied, her heart full to overflowing. As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, Rusty sat at their feet, tail wagging in satisfaction. The dog who'd rescued them both had done his job well. The reception lasted until well past midnight, with dancing under the stars and toasts that grew increasingly creative as the evening progressed. Pete Rodriguez gave a speech about following your heart, even when it led you down unexpected roads. Maria cried happy tears and announced that she'd always known Emma was meant to stay. But the moment Emma treasured most came late in the evening, when she and Marcus slipped away from the celebration to walk out to the pasture where they'd first worked cattle together. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Emma leaned back against his chest, looking out at the land that was now truly theirs. "Only that it took Rusty to bring us together. I might have driven right past and never known what I was missing." "Rusty knew," Marcus said with certainty. "He always knows what people need." As if summoned by his name, the dog appeared beside them, his golden coat silver in the moonlight. He looked up at them with those knowing amber eyes, tail wagging gently. "Thank you," Emma said to him seriously, "for leading me home." Rusty gave a soft woof in response, then settled down to watch the stars with them, his work finally complete. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.